He had told us about this unknown person on Worthington's property prior to her death, and we were trying to get a description from him. He said that the person was 6'2", and he said he was chunky in the stomach. Tried to ascertain the age, and he kind of laughed and looked at me and said, old like him, referring to my age.
And were there, how old were you at the time of the interview, sir?
I was 51. He thought I was 55 or 56 or about his father's age.
Interview with Mr. McCowan that you told the jury about at length. You were aware that Frazier was being interviewed by other troopers under your command, isn't that so?
Yes.
In fact, information was being passed back to you, or you were becoming aware of information during the interview so that you could confront McCowan with what you were finding out from Frazier, isn't that so?
That's correct. They began that night by interviewing him, and then he was interviewed at a later time.
In fact, he was interviewed on May 5th, 2005, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
He was interviewed by you, wasn't he?
Yes, Trooper Mason and I interviewed him.
So you were present at this interview, so we're not dealing with hearsay from another source, right? You were there.
I was there, yes.
And at the point you went to interview him, you already knew about what he had said on the 14th of April, wasn't that so? While you were interviewing McCowan. You had heard about the results.
Part of what he knew, yes.
Did you take further steps to try to prove to yourself or confirm that Frazier was telling you the truth about his actions that weekend?
Yes, we did.
And was one of the things that you did was gathering up his cell phone records, isn't that so?
That's correct.
And you were able to gather up those cell phone records with your investigative techniques. In other words, you did it as a result of being an investigator. Did you ever hand them over, or did you have to get them a different way?
No, we obtained them from the telephone company that he subscribed to.
And I'd like to ask you specifically about that. Did you have a meeting with Frazier after you got his cell phone records?
Yes, we did.
It was that interview on September 29th, 2005.
Yes.
Hey, could you tell the jury, during that interview, sit down with Frazier and basically go through a series of phone numbers that had appeared on his phone bill?
No, we asked him to look at the paperwork with the phone numbers and to pick up the numbers that he could remember that he knew.
And did Frazier go through a series of phone numbers on the phone bill on September 29, 2005?
Yes, he did.
Are these the phone records that you gave to Frazier and had him run through with you?
Yes, they are.
Now, sir, in looking at your report, does it appear that Frazier has gotten to a point where he comes to a 978-585-0217 number?
Yes.
And what did Frazier tell you about that phone number?
He said that it was a pager.
Did he tell you at that time, according to your report, who the pager belonged to?
No, he didn't.
Did you ask him who the pager belonged to?
He said it was a pager.
He never identified it as his own?
He didn't identify it, no.
Now, I'd like to show you exhibit number 69 and direct your attention to this incoming call at 12:03 a.m. See it there? 508-394-3410?
Yes.
Could you look at your report and tell us where Frazier was asked or discussed this particular phone number, 508-394-3410?
We didn't ask or discuss all the phone numbers with him. We asked him to pick out the ones that he knew.
And you now know that phone number goes to the State Police Barracks in South Yarmouth to an inside line, right?
I'm aware of it now, yes.
Did Frazier ever identify it as an inside line of the State Police?
No.
So there was never any discussion, was there, about the call had come from or why it had come in, right?
No, we didn't discuss the numbers with him.
Sir, when you interviewed Jeremy Frazier, were you ever able to determine where he was working in January of 2002?
I know at one time he worked for a moving company.
Magnum
I'm not
Movers?
sure if it's that exact time period, but he did work for Magnum, yes.
And in fact, if I told you, sir, that he was working for Magnum Movers at that time, did you ever have any discussion with Jeremy Frazier about working at Magnum Movers at the time during the weekend that Christa Worthington's body was discovered?
No.
Did you ever talk with Jeremy Frazier about who his cohorts were? In other words, who he worked with at Magnum Movers?
Yes, he did give us some names.
And what names did he give you, sir?
I believe Paul Arsenault was one of the people. Person Dave Murphy who got him the cell phone.
Okay. Anyone else? Did he tell you whether Sean Mulvey worked with him over there at Magnum Movers?
I don't remember that.
But he did talk about someone named Dave Murphy, didn't he?
Yes.
If the jury hasn't already heard, sir, could you tell them again? Exhibit number 69. That's in the name of Dave Murphy, isn't it? David Murphy. Those cell
telephone records?
Right.
Yes, they are.
And you actually had a discussion, didn't you, with Jeremy Frazier about why he was carrying a cell phone in someone else's name, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And could you tell the jury what Jeremy Frazier told you about why he was carrying a cell phone in David Murphy's name?
Yes, that he had rung up his phone cell bill to the point that his parents weren't going to help pay for it they took the phone away from him. He then said that he asked Murphy to get him a phone, that Murphy would put it in his name, and that he would pay the bill.
Is that all he said about David Murphy to you when you interviewed him, actually about David Murphy, on that date we're talking about, September 29, 2005?
I believe he said he worked at Magnum Movers with him.
Did you ever talk to David Murphy?
Yes, I did.
And was the purpose of talking to David Murphy to determine whether Jeremy Frazier was telling you the truth about the circumstances under which he was carrying Dave Murphy's phone?
Yes, it was.
And did you meet with him, you yourself, Sergeant, did you meet with him on January 5th, 2006, David Murphy?
No, I didn't meet with him. I spoke with him on the phone.
So just so we're clear, on January 5th, 2006, did you interview David Murphy by telephone as to the circumstances under which Jeremy Frazier ended up with the cell phone in David Murphy's hand during the weekend or the time that we're talking about in 2002?
I spoke with him over the phone.
Are you aware that David Murphy was released from Walpole State Prison for first-degree murder 6 months before he met Jeremy Frazier?
I'm not aware of that.
Are you aware that David Murphy served a 10 to 15-year sentence at Walpole State Prison just before he met Jeremy Frazier?
Yes, I am.
So now you're aware, or were you aware when you talked to David Murphy that he was a convicted killer?
I knew when I talked to him that he had been in prison.
Did you know what he was in prison for?
I had been informed that it was some type of a manslaughter.
And he had served 10 to 15 years after being charged with first-degree murder, isn't that so?
I'm not sure how much time he served, but I was aware he did time for a crime.
So when you talked to Dave Murphy about, is it fair to say that Dave Murphy was born in 1969 according to your report?
The report says that that's his age.
It's approximately 14 years older than Jeremy Frazier, Frazier being born in 83?
Yes.
As an experienced investigator, did you find it probable that Jeremy Frazier was carrying the phone of a convicted killer and that he had lied to you about why he was carrying it?
No, because Mr. Murphy worked with him at Magnum Movies.
They also worked with a man named Hardy, didn't they? Jim Hardy, Murphy's cousin.
He is Murphy's cousin, yes.
Do you know anything about him?
He owns his own moving company, I believe, in South Dennis.
Do you know anything about his background?
I don't believe so.
Do you know he comes from Somerville?
No, I believe Mr. Murphy came from Somerville.
Do you know that his cousin Jim Hardy comes from Somerville too?
I don't know that, no.
Did they arrive on Cape Cod together? Were you able to determine whether they arrived on Cape Cod together?
No, I wasn't able to do that.